Donald Trump's so-called messaging on affordability does not include increasing workers' incomes to help them afford what they need to buy. Today, while speaking to an audience of McDonald's franchise owners, which includes some of the richest franchise owners in the world, Donald Trump told them they're going to have to fight the minimum wage.
The minimum wage thing you'll have to be talking about. You're going to have to fight. We were talking about California, Gavin Newsom from California. And I knew he's laying siege on the minimum wage. And you people probably know, because that's a very complex subject, and you people probably know better than anybody the impact one way or the other, good or bad. And you're going to let your local congressmen, your senators know about it.
Joining us now for her first MS Now interviews since winning the Virginia's governor election is Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger of Virginia. She's a former Democratic congresswoman and CIA officer. Governor-elect, thank you very much for joining us tonight. It is really great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So Virginia is one of those states that has a higher minimum wage than the federal minimum wage, significantly higher. Which Donald Trump seems to think is a very bad idea, telling people running McDonald's franchises, you're going to have to fight the minimum wage.
I mean, what we continue to hear from this president is just out of step with what, frankly, I heard on the ground over the past nearly 2 years of my campaign for governor. People are struggling. People are really having a hard time making ends meet, whether it's costs at the grocery store, the pharmacy counter, when they get their energy bill, when they sign their kids up for daycare, if they can find a spot. And housing prices continue to go up, whether you're a renter or a buyer. And the reality is that life just continues to be difficult. And to hear this president kind of so flippantly talk about something such as the minimum wage, not addressing real issues within the housing market, real issues within, across communities where we see energy prices going up, real issues that affect people. And chiefly, we will see increased healthcare costs continue to go up, in part because of the so-called one big beautiful bill. So he is wreaking havoc on our economy and on people, and ultimately not in any way being responsive. And I think we saw that in the results of the Virginia election. People want a governor who is going to be responsive to the challenges that they are facing on the ground and in their day-to-day lives.
If a Democrat wins a state like Virginia by 5 points, other Democrats want to know, how did you do it? What do we need to know? What do we need to know nationally? To win by 15, you must have something that national Democrats need to know about.
Well, I will say it's the largest Democratic margin of victory in Virginia since the Kennedy administration. And the way that we did it, frankly, not just winning our 3 statewide seats, but also flipping 13 seats in the House of Delegates, where we had tremendous candidates who want to represent their communities. For me, it was all about traveling all across our state, listening to people, which sounds, such a simple thing, But the reality is that far too often people will get prescriptive about what it is that we need to do policy-wise. But if you are on the ground, if you are listening, if you are mobilizing people around the concerns that they have for themselves, for their kids, for their community, for their local economy, people want a government that is responsive, and certainly whether it's issues of lowering costs, issues of strengthening our schools, or overall safety and security within our communities. People were really responsive to the campaigning that I did in every corner of our Commonwealth, focused on really straightforward policies that are going to make an impact on the things that are, front of mind for them. The last things you think about before you lay your head down at night, and the first things you think about in the morning.
When you talk about every corner of the Commonwealth, I think of the corner that goes way down into Tennessee, shares the border with Tennessee, Tazewell, towns like that down there. And I looked at those voting returns, and you perform better in those places, which are very, very strongly Republican places, than any Democrat I've seen running in that kind of region. So you have found a way to talk to Trump voters and earned their vote. Is there something that was specifically targeted at Trump voters in what you were presenting?
I think, and you're talking about the corner of Virginia that is known as the place where Virginia begins. And you know, if you look at a map, it's actually west of Detroit. Virginia is a large state. And in going to communities that don't typically vote for Democrats, that is admittedly the case, I think what was important for me was to demonstrate interest and true desire to get to know people, to be present, to demonstrate respect. Because, you know, in every part of Virginia, whether they're historically Republican voting or Democratic voting, or they're toss-up communities, whether they're, you know, down the street from my home or they're hours and hours away, people want to feel rooted, and people want to feel that their concerns matter and that their voices matter, that their communities matter. You know, and I moved back home to Virginia 11 years ago to be closer to family. And for me, I grew up in the suburbs of Richmond. I was able to move back home. My husband was able to, you know, have his job remote. It worked for us. But in so many parts of Virginia, that's just not an option. And so to even be able to speak to what it is to, you know, have that feeling of being rooted in a community that you love, a place where you want to raise your kids, that's not a possibility for so many people who are getting either priced out of the communities they grew up in, or where there's not enough economic opportunity for their kids to come back to. Then you add on to that the challenges of childcare deserts, and you add on to that, you know, changing economic frictions, the attack on the federal workforce we're seeing coming out of Washington, the fact that no fewer than 6 rural hospitals across Virginia will close. You know, these are serious challenges that you know, I intend to address and certainly heard about during my time on the campaign trail.
Abigail Spanberger, Governor-elect of Virginia, thank you very much for joining us here tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Remember Infrastructure Week, the week that never happened during the first Trump presidency? Well, it's happening now, and Donald Trump's version of Infrastructure Week is to kill the most important infrastructure project in the United States. Donald Trump is trying to stop the funding for construction for a new tunnel under the Hudson River, connecting the state of New York and the state of New Jersey, a project that already secured funding with bipartisan support during the Biden presidency. And now the Interstate Commission in charge of building the tunnel has filed a lawsuit in federal court against the Trump administration for withholding $205 million in payments for work on the tunnel. The last Republican mayor of New York City, billionaire Michael Bloomberg, writes, "This is not some local pet project. It's of national economic importance. The new tunnel will allow passengers up and down the East Coast to move faster and more reliably, while also mitigating road congestion in numerous states and relieving air travel pressures. It will also expand the entire region's labor market, accelerate its housing growth, and increase its business activity and investment. From an economic perspective, the tunnel is an absolute no-brainer, and it's long overdue." New Jersey's Governor Mikey Sherrill won her election last year by the surprisingly large margin of 14 points, and fighting for the new tunnel was one of the ways she beat Donald Trump's chosen candidate for governor of New Jersey. Joining us now is New Jersey's Democratic Governor Mikey Sherrill. Governor, thank you very much for joining us tonight. There's Donald Trump, who doesn't understand anything about business and the economy the way Mike Bloomberg does, and you are going to have to fight for every penny now, it seems.
That's exactly right. We are already at work on this tunnel. Millions have been spent on the high-end tunneling gear. It's at the site. We've employed about 1,000 people already. I was just over at Tunnelly Avenue the other day, where concrete pads are being poured in anticipation of getting the tunneling gear ready to go. And all this could come to a stop Friday, which is why in New Jersey, New York, our states are suing the president because he's illegally withholding this money that could account for almost 100,000 jobs in the region and about $20 billion in economic output.
Yeah, and this this kind of funding is not easy to achieve. It took a bipartisan support group to get it done. People were working on it for years, many, many years, some over the course of decades from the conception of the first notion of it. And so you win this, you get it, and Donald Trump comes in and says, I'm just going to take it away.
Yeah, fighting tooth and nail in the first Trump administration. I was called the tunnel-obsessed Congresswoman. I am now the tunnel-obsessed governor because I am not going to quit. This is too important to the region. It's too important to the country. This is the most important infrastructure program in the nation. It is a rail tunnel from New Jersey into New York. About 200,000 people go through the current rail tunnel right now. It was damaged by Superstorm Sandy. As you heard from Mike Bloomberg, who talked a little bit about how important it is to business and commerce, not just for the region, but for the country. It makes no sense when you see a president who is harming jobs, harming the economy right here, especially when his jobs numbers are not looking so hot. But as we've seen across the country, every time Trump gets involved, costs go up and working people suffer.
I mean, and New York is the heartbeat of this economy and has been for a couple hundred years now in this country. Donald Trump doesn't seem to understand that you cannot attack it and then expect the economy to thrive, expect to see good economic numbers.
And Lawrence, if you'll forgive my state pride, I would say a lot of that heartbeat in New York is fueled by New Jersey workers. And in order for that to continue, this tunnel has to function. And as I said, the current Hudson River Tunnel right now has been damaged. It's over 115 years old. We have got to keep at work on this. It is such a no-brainer. And so to take the money that has already been committed, $15 billion, $4 billion of it already ready to be put to work in an account, and to put a stop to it, which will end things on Friday if he is not stopped from this illegal action. It really is such a harm to the region and such a complete waste of money, given that we have already spent money, we are ready to go, and any delay will just raise costs.
What did you learn in your campaign and in this story about Donald Trump's ability to lose elections for Republicans?
He hurts working people. He hurts families because, this tunnel isn't just about all of the people that could be employed with really good jobs in this region. It's also about those commuters that go back and forth every single day. My husband's one of them. It's the difference if, you're having a delay between picking your kid up at daycare on time or making it home to eat with your family or your kid's soccer or basketball game. And Trump just doesn't seem to care about families and people across the country. He's been enriching himself now to the tune of billions of dollars and really ending the ability for other families to make it here, to create the opportunity that this country is so known for. And that's why I keep saying it makes no sense. I'm going to fight it tooth and nail. We're in court now, and we are going to see that the workers can continue, that commuters get the type of commute they deserve, and that the economy can flourish.
New Jersey Governor Mikey Sherrill, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
While there are some tea leaves on the Democratic side, albeit small, and we don't know. We've learned not to get ahead of ourselves and prognosticate on terms of what might happen. But Democrat Eileen Higgins has won the closely watched Miami mayoral race. Higgins made history, becoming the first woman ever to lead the city. Her victory also marks the first time a Democrat has won the Miami mayoral race in nearly 30 years. Higgins campaigned as a Democrat despite the race technically being nonpartisan. She defeated Trump-endorsed Emilio Gonzalez by nearly 20 points. Democrats also claimed to win last night in Georgia, where their candidate flipped a statehouse seat in a red-leaning district. Democrat Eric Gissler is projected to defeat Republican Matt Guest in the fourth in the special election in Georgia's House, District 121, according to unofficial results from the Secretary of State's office. Gissler's victory would be a major upset in a district President Trump won last year by 12 points. Gissler lost the race for the same district back in 2024 by 22 points. Joining us now live from Miami, White House reporter for Axios, Mark Caputo. Mark, what are you hearing about these specific elections?
I think when you put everything in context, it was a good night for Democrats, and it's one of those things, certainly in Florida, where Republicans said this is sort of a gut check time. Yes, it's true, all of these elections are sort of unique in their own way, but there's a general pattern, whether it's in Florida, whether it's in Georgia, or whether it was in Tennessee with the congressional race recently, is that when Republicans are winning in very strong Trump seats, they're not winning by as much. And when there are purple seats, Democrats are winning them. The city of Miami is an interesting sort of jurisdiction because even though people associate the city of Miami with Miami-Dade County more broadly, this is sort of a blue performing city in major elections. But in mayoral elections and local elections and odd year elections, Republicans have dominated. That ended last night, and it ended majorly and in a big way that got a lot of people's attention.
So, Mark, Eileen Higgins, who will be the next mayor now of Miami, made as part of her campaign and central to her campaign these ICE raids, the immigration raids. She talked about it again last night in her victory speech, and we're talking to the media afterward as well, calling them inhumane and a scourge in the community there in Miami-Dade. So how important were they to her victory?
I think that is important. To use the affordability word again, that was a major messaging issue for Eileen Higgins. The city of Miami, Miami-Dade County, South Florida, Florida, very expensive place to live. It's not just tariffs, by the way, it's insurance, which is killing a lot of people. And then in addition to that, they did a lot of messaging that was sort of anti-Trump in order to motivate their base. If you look at the turnout of last night, there was about 41% of the electorate was Democrat and about 34% was Republican. That's called a D+7 electorate. She won by almost 19 points. So it means she didn't just win Democrats big. She might have won a lot of Republicans, and she did really well with independents. So her message across the board was well received and very effective.
Mark, I'm interested in who showed up down there to campaign. I saw Rahm Emanuel was there. Obviously, that's somebody who has his eye on something else and sees Florida as an electoral college-rich state and wants to put down roots there early. What can you tell us about who showed up? And frankly, I think, could you clarify whether or not the DNC getting involved really had an impact on this election? My sense is that it didn't.
You are correct. When the DNC announced on November 20th that it was going all in on the Miami mayoral race, by then it was pretty clear that Eileen Higgins was going to win. Her own internal polling showed that Trump's net approval rating was negative 17 percentage points, which is pretty bad. And her internal polling showed she was going to win by about double digits. Her Higgins campaign thought maybe she'd win by 9 or 10. Again, she won by 18. You know, more broadly, the problem that Democrats have in Florida is that for years, for decades, they have not done sort of the spade work that's necessary to keep the voter rolls alive, to conduct effective voter registration. They've also been hamstrung a bit by national forces that are beyond their control and by a party that drifts more leftward than the electorate itself. The other thing is Florida sort of imports Republican supervoters, older retirees who don't want to pay income taxes and taxes, and that is sort of an advantage for Republicans as well. I would caution Democrats looking at the Miami mayoral race into thinking, oh, this means we're going to win Florida. That having been said, Congresswoman Maria Elvira Salazar, who is the South Florida Congresswoman, one of the three, who represents the Miami area and the city of Miami, she's probably looking at a very difficult race. She has already started to change a lot of her messaging and has become more critical of Trump's immigration policies and proposals. And I expect you're going to see more of that as she fights to stay alive and avoid what happened to Emilio Gonzalez here in the city of Miami.
Yeah.
And Mika, I think these are local races. We shouldn't, overread into them. But I think it's about momentum here. This is a string of wins now for Democrats in the last 6 weeks, 2 months or so. And that's important just for the party to start feeling better about itself, for fundraising, for organizing as it gears up for next year. That's where this really matters.
Yeah. And Florida's interesting because, a lot of, these small races might represent how people are feeling about what they see happening around them.
Miami-Dade specifically is interesting. Donald Trump in 2016 lost it by 30 points, 3-0. Picked up ground in 2020, and then in 24, he won it by 12 points, which is an incredible swing.
All right, White House reporter for Axios, Mark Caputo, thank you very much for being on this morning. We turn now to this week's historic shakeup in South Florida, where Miami voters elected former County Commissioner Eileen Higgins as the first ever woman to lead the city. She is also the first declared Democrat to win Miami's mayoral race in nearly 30 years. Higgins beat her Trump-endorsed opponent by roughly 20 points. And Mayor-elect Higgins joins us now. Congratulations. First of all, what a win on so many levels. And to what do you point to that made your campaign such a success?
Well, I've served the residents of the city of Miami for 8 years on the county commission. And so I have a real track record on working on things that matter to them. Affordability, it's a real, everybody's talking about it. But for us, our housing affordability crisis has existed for some time. So I brought with me a track record of building thousands of units of affordable housing. And folks trusted me to do the same for the rest of the city of Miami. Of course, there's other things that matter to people. The city has a long history of corruption, and they just wanted that to stop so we could get back to a government, serve the people. And then there's the politics of trickle-down hatred, where our immigrant population is not only insulted, but also is really afraid now of the federal government. And I'm sure that influenced a lot of people's vote.
I want to talk about that in 1 minute, because I think it's so important to talk about the massive shift from 24 to the end of 25. But first, let's talk about affordability, because it's so important for pundits, for political scientists, for people that aren't on the ground, that aren't knocking on doors, that aren't shaking hands, that aren't talking to people on the campaign trail. Talk about the main issues. If you could list the top 3 issues on affordability, what are the 3 things where voters in your city are feeling the most squeeze on right now?
So for us in Miami, it's housing. Housing is the top issue. If you're renting, rents are too high. If you happen to be a homeowner, then you tack on the cost of property insurance in Florida, which our state government has really done nothing to help them with. And you also have what's going on with this tariff issue, which is raising prices at the grocery store, at the drugstore, and for small business owners, right? We forget about that. You can go into a hair salon that the price of extensions that they used to buy has gone up by $20. And do they cut their profits, or do they charge their customers in Little Havana $20 more? Neither of those people can afford that. So affordability is all over the map. It's not just for residents, also for small business owners.
I now want to talk about the impact of the ICE raids of Hispanic who are either on a green card or are citizens of the United States, or in the process of legally becoming a citizen of the United States. We've all heard, I know you've heard it so much more than us, but we've all heard Hispanic Americans saying, my God, I'm successful, I've lived here forever, I'm an American citizen, and yet I don't leave my house without a passport because I'm afraid I'm going to be stopped, pulled out of my car, and treated the way we've seen time and again. I'm curious, we've seen the Hispanic vote in New Jersey, in the governor's race there, in Virginia, just a wild swing over the past year toward Democrats. What did you see in Miami in your race?
You cannot go anywhere in our community where someone doesn't come up and whisper to you, my brother, my uncle, Alligator Alcatraz, I have no idea where he is. They disappeared him. So people are afraid. And I've never experienced that in any of my elections before. People wanted government to work for them. They were never afraid of government, and that's changed. So we also have the unique situation in our county, the entire county, not just the city, about 15% of our population has temporary protected status. So that's more or less 300,000 people. Are we really going to deport 300,000 people and ruin the economy of South Florida? To me, the politics, this anti-immigrant fervor, it's just gone too far. It's inhumane. It's cruel. I'm Catholic, so I think it's a sin. And it's bad for the economy. It has to stop. We need a secure border. We want to know who's coming and who's going. And we don't want any criminals here. That's what they told us they were going to do. They were going to make sure that there were no criminals here. Well, that's not what they're doing. They're going after everybody, rich and poor. And it is really, really changing how people think about who they want to speak up for them and stick up for them in local government.
Mayor-elect for the city of Miami, Eileen Higgins, thank you. Congratulations. And we'll be following you along. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Good having you on.
Today, there is growing anxiety on the right over the results of a Texas special election that the Wall Street Journal editorial board summed up like this. How does a Republican lose by 14 points in a safe, conservative Texas state Senate seat that President Trump carried by 17 points in 2024? Answer: when there's a voter backlash against the Trump administration. Notably, it's mass deportation debacles. Here's the victor, Democratic Taylor Remnant, a union leader and first-time candidate, talking to MS Now's Joe Scarborough about how he won big in that deep red district.
And a place like Fort Worth, Texas, when you knocked on doors, had people that had voted Republican their whole life decide to vote for you.
To me, it was simple. We had to focus on solutions, not partisan politics. Bringing communities together, that's what it's all about. In Texas, we look out for our neighbors, and that's exactly what we did with this campaign.
Alejandro Serrano is reporter for the Texas Tribune. Julie Roginski is a Democratic strategist and author of the Salty Politics newsletter on Substack. So, Alejandro, what propelled this victory? What can you tell us?
Thank you for having me. I think there's a couple of things on the ground here in Texas that people are still litigating. One is obviously the circumstances surrounding the election. It was on January, Saturday, and right after a cold snap here in Texas that affected campaigning and voting. But also it is the national discourse and the politics that we just heard about at the beginning of the segment, that might this be a response to the president's policies? And also in Tarrant County, there's a lot of local GOP leaders who have angered presidents in numerous ways through their socially conservative policies. So that's one of the big questions right now is, was this a response to that?
How much was that part of the conversation? This is not the kind of campaign that gets, big coverage. But when you looked at the ads, and I don't know if they had a debate, what were the conversations like? Where was the tension?
There wasn't any debates, but when you look at the campaigns, you see that they were run very differently. The Republican candidate, Lee Wambsgans, ran a campaign very much around MAGA issues, and Tyler Remnant ran more of a quiet, on-the-ground campaign. And part of that was because he was financially outgunned by a lot. She had millions of dollars in contributions, and she had one contribution from one group that overshadowed all of Remnant's contributions. So I was speaking with his strategist yesterday for a report I had today. They were saying that, they kind of knew that they had to go door to door, people's living rooms, kitchens, and kind of hear their issues. And then those issues ended up dominating his campaign.
So, Julie, even Florida's governor, Ron DeSantis, a complainer about MAGA, said this: a swing of this magnitude is not something that can be dismissed. Republicans should be clear-eyed about the political environment heading into the midterms. I mean, that said, Democrats like Beto O'Rourke have been saying for years, Texas is about to turn purple, Texas is about to turn blue. But what does this really tell us?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, any Republican that doubles down on MAGA, and they're expected to because it's a loyalty test and Donald Trump demands that they do, is in trouble this year. I don't care how red your district is. This should be a wake-up call. I mean, this was a very, very, very red district, the reddest county in the country. and then just flip blue. I mean, what does that say?
So is that a damned if you do and damned if you don't? Because the money comes from the MAGA folks, right?
Well, the money comes from MAGA folks, but more importantly, you can't cross this president without him going negative on you. Look what happened to Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, the woman was beyond loyal to Trump. She stepped out of line on one thing. Done. Look what they're doing all over the place to Susan Collins, who stepped out of line once or twice, and now he's saying she deserves to lose. I mean, consistently, you cannot cross this president without him using his megaphone and the power of the bully pulpit to go after his own party. On the other hand, Texas is going to have not really a blue wave this year. I believe Texas is going to have a brown wave this year. All the Latino voters who voted for Trump in 2024 along the border counties and other places, all of a sudden those people have completely flipped on the president. And what you're going to see is the redistricting that Texas Republicans undertook to make those districts somewhat more Latino because they had to jam those in to make it more Republican. This is going to backfire on them. And if I were Greg Abbott and I were the Republicans in Texas today, I would be seriously thinking about, oh, my God, what did we just do? Because we potentially created a lot more Democratic districts than we anticipated doing.
Alejandro, 3 times in the 48 hours leading up to the race, Donald Trump posted get out the vote messages. But by Sunday afternoon, he claimed to know nothing about the race.
What is your reaction to that?
I don't know. I didn't hear about it. Somebody ran where?
In Texas, a special election for legislative
the 9th state Senate seat.
I'm not involved in that. That's a local Texas race. It's too bad. What can I say? I have nothing to do with it.
Had you been seeing any signs on the ground, or are you seeing signs on the ground that Trump's influence is waning in Texas?
You know, it's really difficult to measure that, but to the point about the importance of Latinos and Latino voters in Texas, we're talking about a county that 1 in 5 eligible voters are Hispanic. You know, some of the early analysis coming out of this election is that Mr. Remick won some neighborhoods and areas that are predominantly Hispanic by more than 50 points in former presidential candidate Harris. I think this is going to be one of the biggest questions heading into November in Texas.
Texas is going to be fascinating. There's no doubt about that. But these campaigns cost a lot of money these days. The numbers never cease to amaze me. Despite the polls and the special elections that would show you Democrats are doing very, very, very well, the money game isn't necessarily so great because the RNC holds a nearly $100 million advantage over the DNC in the latest FEC filings. Does that tell us anything?
No, I mean, they control levers of government. So, of course, donors give to people who might do something for them down the road. And so, of course, you have the Republicans who control everything being able to have an advantage there. Look, I'm a consultant. I love spending money. That's what people like me do. But I don't think money is dispositive this year. You saw that in this election. You see that in other elections coming up. You see that in an election coming up in New Jersey in a couple of days where outside groups are spending enormous amounts of money against the frontrunner, who I still think is going to win. Because voters ultimately, I think, understand what they're voting for this year. They don't need to be convinced by outside groups that Donald Trump is great. They're not going to be convinced that Donald Trump is great. They're not going to be convinced that they can't afford the price of meat. They can't, they can't afford the price of health care. They don't need an outside group telling them, no, let's spend $100 million telling you that things are fine in your life when you know full well they're not. And so money's great to have in a campaign, but not in an environment like this. It is almost impossible to spend an amount of money to tell voters that they're not feeling what they're feeling right now.
Alejandro Serrano and Julie Roginski, thank you both.
But I just have to start tonight with that unbelievably delicious rebuke of Donald Trump in his literal backyard. I mean, yes, today was Election Day in Florida's 87th state House district, which includes, as I was just talking with Chris about, Mar-a-Lago. And just to give you a sense of how this district has voted in the past, because there was no way that this was going to sail into a blue seat. A Republican candidate won there by 19 points in 2024, and Trump himself carried it by about 11 points in the presidential election. That was less than 2 years ago. And tonight, a Democrat is projected to flip that seat. The Associated Press projected that a small business owner, I just shouted her out, but her name is Emily Gregory, and she's going to win this race, and she will become Donald Trump's next representative in the Florida State House. Now, Trump endorsed the Republican in this race. Trump himself voted in this election and voted by mail, which is extra hilarious given his relentless attacks on mail-in voting. And also, he was literally in Florida at the time. So the list of things that are amazing about this Democratic flip is kind of too long to go through right now. But here's the big picture. It appears that this Florida seat is going to be the 29th legislative seat that Democrats have flipped since Trump's second term began. Republicans, I should note, have flipped zero, nada, none, no seats since the 2024 election. And all of those seats Democrats have flipped, all 29 of them, this one sure does hit a little different, though, doesn't it? Joining me now, fresh off her unbelievable victory tonight, is Emily Gregory. Well, first of all, congratulations. I mean, I don't think I can repeat for viewers who are tuning into this enough. I mean, Trump won this district by 11 points in the last election. The Republican who formerly held the seat before he resigned, Mike Caruso, previously won it by 19 points. You've just flipped the seat tonight. How are you feeling?
Jen, it's a pretty wild night. When I started this 9 months ago, I obviously thought it was possible. I think most people thought I was insane looking at the numbers. But I'm still like pretty shocked. We did it. We just did it.
What do you think about, there's so much to ask you about, but what do you think about the fact that Donald Trump is now one of your constituents?
I mean, I don't think all of that much about it, right? He's one of 115,000 registered voters in District 87. My opponent made, him forefront in his campaign, and I focused more on the voters in District 87, what everybody needs, what all of us will do better with lower property insurance, with expanded health care, and with strong public schools.
So you answered part of my next question, but let me ask you, I mean, you said when you told friends, when you announced you're running, people thought you were insane. I'm sure a lot of your friends and family said, why are you doing this? How are you going to win in this district? Have you seen how Republican this district is? But for people out there who are thinking about it or who are doubting it, how did you win? What would you tell them as your advice about how to kind of flip a district like this?
Jen, I love that question. And I say, go for it. I say, back yourself. It only takes you getting off the sidelines to make a difference. And if you want the world to look different, then you have to go out and make it different. I think we've learned over the last several years that no one is coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. So I might have done some crazy calculus to decide that this was a flip opportunity, but it was, and we did it. So my math worked.
It feels like it's settling in for you, and that is so understandable. You're about to be a member of the state legislature in Florida. I'm sure tomorrow morning you're going to wake up and pinch yourself again, which is as you've deserved to do. Now, whoever wins, you are also going to be voting on things. There are new congressional maps that are going to be part of the special session in April. You previously said that you would not support mid-decade redistricting. Is that still the case, I should ask? And if so, how do you plan on fighting for efforts from the Republican majority in the Florida State House? Because you're about to be a part of the legislature. It's real now.
It's really happening. I know, like you said, I think it will sink in tomorrow. I'm having a fairly out-of-body experience right now. But there's 5 representatives in the other room. So, I'm going to huddle with them and figure out how we can fight this because, yes, any efforts to redistrict are a direct call from the president to redistrict in favor of Republicans before the midterms. And the vast majority, overwhelming majority of Floridians made that illegal in 2010 with the Fair Districts Amendment. So we know the voters don't want this, and I'm going to fight every day for Florida families and for District 87.
This wasn't the only race in Florida tonight. We were watching your race so closely because we'd been talking to you about coming on too. Do you have any sense of kind of how other races, are there other surprises that people should be looking out for out there? Or other people whose friends told them, this is crazy, don't run, who are going to surprise people?
I don't know about Florida. My phone got taken away like 90 minutes ago. But I will say to anyone that's thinking about it, just do it. Just if we want different representation and you want people, normies, as I call them, to represent you and to be legislating on your behalf and, set the direction for your state or your local government or whatever the case is, go do it. I think it's so important that we have different voices that are more representative of the average Floridian.
You won't know until you put yourself out there. Emily Gregory, thank you for letting us be a part of your out-of-body experience. I thoroughly enjoyed seeing you process this. Congratulations again, and we'll look forward to seeing what you do. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much.